you want to use your values as your metaphorical compass, right? Just to guide your responses, your choices, your behavior, your direction. So, as an example, if I'm feeling disappointed, well, using mindfulness, I would teach someone how to acknowledge their disappointment with the sentence, which maybe we can go in a little bit later. But it would sound like this: even though I'm noticing that I'm disappointed right now, because I value resilience and creativity, I'm going to stay, in touch with the action steps that I had set aside for myself. I'm going to just make it happen anyways. And as I said to you earlier, because emotions are just visitors in the moment. But what we tend to do is we make our choices and let our behavior be a reflection of the strong emotion that we might be feeling in the moment.
Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of the Reshape Your Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Morgan Nolte, and today we're talking about one of my favorite topics, which is behavior change, habit change, through mindfulness practices. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation. And if you have some stress in your life that you would love to get reduced or get rid of completely, or if you have anxiety or you have unproductive behaviors or habits that you really want to change, you're going to find this episode very helpful. I'm speaking with Alicia McLucas, and she has 18 years of experience as a personal and professional development coach, mental health coach, corporate presenter, and is a certified mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher. So I feel like we all need one of her in our back pocket at all times. She helps individuals and corporate teams and leaders balance the fast pace of their lives with opportunities to manage stress and bring more fulfillment to their day to day. And through a mindfulness based approach, blended with evidence based tools and practices, her clients begin to learn how to skillfully navigate strong emotions, stressful thoughts, limiting beliefs, and unhelpful patterns of behavior that contribute to stress, anxiety, and burnout. I'm very much excited to get to that unproductive patterns of behavior that contribute to stress, because I think so many people don't know what they are, first of all, because they're on autopilot all the time and they don't really know which of their own behaviors are stressing them out. But then on the other side of the coin, some people very much do, and it's related to, like, I know what to do, but I'm not doing it, and that's stressing me out. Like, why am I not doing what I should be doing? Alicia also has experience as a health coach focused on behavior change and nutrition, working alongside a clinical team helping people prevent and reverse chronic metabolic disease. So, this whole episode kind of came about when Alicia came back into office hours. She's actually a Zivli member, and she'll talk to you a little bit about that. And I said, "It's been so long since I've seen you. Tell me how you're doing." And she's spoke for like 5 minutes, and I said, "You got to come on the podcast, because I can just tell you're full of wisdom. You're full of insights, both from her personal diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, I think a couple of years ago, but you'll have to correct me on that. But then also in a professional sense, coaching people with metabolic health issues. So thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show and just share some of these insights that you shared with our Zivli community during office hours to our broader podcast community."
Thank you so much. I have always been a great fan of yours, Dr. Nolte, and it's a great honor, really, truly, to be here and share and kind of pay it forward a little.
Yeah. So tell us, like, I think, when did you join Zivli? Was it a couple years ago?
It was
And
shortly.
what was that experience like for you when you got diagnosed with diabetes and then you reversed it? Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yes. It was about 2 years ago. And that I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I had been pre-diabetic for many years, had gestational diabetes when I was pregnant with my children. And I remember them telling me back then, which I was in my early 30s at the time, you have a 60% chance of being the type 2 diabetic by the time you're 60. And guess what? That's the exact year that I was officially diagnosed. It didn't come too much of a shock to me. In some ways it was, in some ways not. I have several other family members that are type 2 diabetic, and, And I just thought it wasn't going to happen to me because I do all of what I thought was the right things, right? So, long story short, that's when I came to Zivli to find a community. I was already doing some research on my own, doing lots of reading from Dr. Jason Fung and Dr. Ben Bickman, and working and just really trying to get as much knowledge as I could. Ironically, I was offered a job to be a health coach at a company that worked with people with metabolic conditions. And so it was just so fascinating that that opportunity came my way. I love the work I was doing there. Really learning so much from myself, but how to really work with nutrition and different aspects of healthy habits to reverse it, which I was able to do. And it's not. I can tell you that it's not so easy to make these kinds of changes. It wasn't for myself, and I've been a coach for 18 years, know all about behavior change, but I really was committed to walking the talk, and I wanted to make this happen for myself and was able to, and overcame lots of obstacles and still do on the daily. So that's what kind of brought me to Zivli and to the work that I was doing as a health coach. But I have been a coach for a long time, more of a personal professional development life coach, working with human beings on wanting to feel the way that they move closer to the way they really want to feel in their life. So, um, and that brought me to Zivli. Coming back, I left my job that I was working at, and I'm like, oh, I finally get to join office hours. And then I popped in, and here I am. So,
Yes, I love it. So I have to know, like you said, you were a coach for 18 years. You understand behavior change. You understand the principles behind it, but it was still hard for you to change the behaviors that had contributed to the type 2 diabetes. If you had to list like your top obstacles towards that behavior change, what would you say they were?
um, it, it would be about thoughts. Really, it's about working with challenging thought processes. Um, what led me to the diagnosis pretty quickly from being pre-D to type 2 diabetic was that I had decided to go completely plant-based. And I did that to get my cholesterol down. I was working with some of the best plant-based doctors on the planet. and and my cholesterol kept on getting worse. My triglycerides were getting higher and higher. And I was like, "What's going on? I don't understand." I mean, I'm a completely adherent to the nutrition to be a vegan. And, it took a while, and I finally asked the question myself, "Is there a possibility that I'm insulin resistant?" Right, and they're like, Maybe." So I ended up getting that diagnosis because I was eating lots of carbohydrates, right? What do plant-based eaters eat? Lots of potatoes and rice and pasta. I was eating healthy carbohydrates, right? So that's kind of what kind of led me to, kind of getting that diagnosis. So the hardest thing about that, though, for me to overcome was the thoughts. I'm like, man, I mean, I was just like plant-based being so good, and now I'm a type 2 diabetic. I'm this is never gonna work. It's the same thoughts that we all have as human beings, right? Just because you're trained in something, and I've coached so many amazing people in the world that everyone would maybe assume they've got it all together. Everyone's a human being and everybody has their struggles, including me. So I had to work with those challenging thoughts and stressful thoughts. That's what I mean by walking the talk. And it took some time, and it's a constant practice. It's a mindfulness practice.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, then, did you switch away from a plant-based approach?
In a second.
Yeah. When you realized, "Oh, maybe this is actually making my insulin resistance
Yes,
worse."
in a second, I switched it, and I'm like, "This is not good." Lab results are showing the exact opposite I want it to happen for cholesterol, and then, of course, the type 2 diabetes diagnosis, and so I switched right away to what some of the research I'd been reading suggested, which was a very lower carb, nutrition plan, did keto for a little bit, and, for myself, found it unsustainable for the long term. So just went to lower carb, and that's how reversal happened.
Yeah.
And also, it's the managing stress. Uh,
Yeah.
it's the getting enough sleep. It's so many other factors, managing strong emotions that come up in our lives. So, I think of it as like a puzzle, and there's all these different pieces of our life that want to fit in together just right to come together so that we now have like our special recipe of what works for our body. And that's going to be different. What works for my body is going to be different that might work for the next person's body. And I got to really witness this while I was monitoring hundreds of people's blood sugar numbers, right?
Mhm.
And what they were eating, their food logs, and all of that. So I really just wanted to hang in there to overcome my own obstacles, getting back to your question, and be committed to my health, using my values to guide that commitment.
Yeah. Okay. So I love that you brought up the values. Let's start there with people because I think that you have kind of an exercise, don't you, to help people kind of find their own values so that they're taking more inspired and energetically aligned action is the phrase that I like to use.
I love that.
That's something that you wanted to walk our listeners through because
Sure.
people, I think, don't think enough. And part of living an intentional life is knowing what your values are so that you know what you can say yes to joyfully and what maybe you should say no to because it's not in alignment with your values. And I always love to say everything that you say yes to means you're saying no to something else. So we have to really have a clear understanding of what that trade-off is. So how do you coach your clients on really understanding and identifying those values?
The first thing I'll have them do is just get a blank piece of paper, 8.5 by 11, and to reflect upon, sit quietly, reflect upon what are the most important things for me to have a sense of in my life so that I can be the best version of myself as I walk on this planet. Okay. And it'll be different for every person. There are hundreds and hundreds of values words. So there's lots of room for us, for all of us. But values can be things like you might value connection, you could value kindness, you could value professional growth, creativity, peacefulness, fun, right? Family, love, health, right? Solitude, spirituality. There's so many values words out there, and I really want my clients to get to know what's meaningful to you, right? What are those things? And one way to find out, because that could still leave someone with not knowing, is to consider what do you enjoy doing? So if someone says, oh, Alicia, I really value gardening, okay, beautiful. But gardening's really not the values word. I would ask them, when you're gardening, what do you get a sense of? Oh, connection, nature, beauty, clarity, whatever they get a sense of, those are the values.
Yeah. So the step one is to kind of identify what brings you joy in this life, essentially, and
Exactly.
then kind of link that with a values-based word.
Yes, link it with a values-based word, write those words down. I tell them on that blank piece of paper to use colored markers. I don't want a spreadsheet. I don't want bullet points. I want this to be fun and creative. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of like, if I work with a lot of different mindsets in the world, and people would love to just pull out a spreadsheet and start putting things that
That's
no.
totally my bullet point it. I'm
Yeah.
good to go.
Right. Like, no, no, no. I need you to really get in your body more for this experiment and not on the computer. Right. So use colored markers or pencils, whatever you want, and write the words all over the page, right? Whatever they are. And I tell them to keep this piece of paper for the rest of their life till their dying day, right? And to add to that piece of paper as they discover another value, something that's important to them. Whenever you're experiencing stress, it typically means that you're not aligned with a value or values that are very important to you.
Will you repeat that? Because I think that's really like the take home message of the entire episode was that sentence. So will you please repeat that?
Yes, whenever you're experiencing stress, it's typically because you're not aligned with a value of yours.
Hmm. But I think a lot of people haven't identified those values.
They haven't. So this is the work that happens in coaching conversations
Yeah.
or on
Okay.
your own, right?
Interesting. Okay. Is there another step besides that, like on the piece of paper, or is that the values we're
So
explaining?
you want to use your values as your metaphorical compass, right? Just to guide your responses, your choices, your behavior, your direction. So as an example, if I'm feeling disappointed, well, using mindfulness, I would teach someone how to acknowledge their disappointment with the sentence, which maybe we can go in a little bit later.
Yep.
But it would sound like this, even though I'm noticing that I'm disappointed right now, because I value resilience and creativity, I'm going to stay, in touch with the action steps that I had set aside for myself. I'm going to just make it happen anyways. And as I said to you earlier, because emotions are just visitors in the moment. But what we tend to do is we make our choices and let our behavior be a reflection of the strong emotion that we might be feeling in the moment instead of our values. And that's not so good to do because your emotions are very unstable. They can shift. One moment you could be angry, and then the next moment you're disappointed, and then the next moment you're sad, right? So it's a wobbly ground. But your values are solid, they're stable, they're the core of who you are.
Mhm.
What
You mentioned in office hours, like with emotional eating, for example, that I don't know how you worded it, but you worded it really well. And it's like when you're emotionally eating, you're not necessarily making a values-based choice more often than not. You're reacting instead of
resp
responding, right?
yes. So
Is that how you
the reaction word, just consider the 2 words side by side. Reaction, you can feel the energy of it. It's a little stressful, right? When we're angry, we can lash out as a reaction, and then consider respond has a little bit more of a thoughtful feel to it, behind it. So we instead of letting our emotions guide our behavior, our choices with emotional eating, we're gonna want to acknowledge what we're feeling. It's very important to acknowledge what's true for us as a way to honor ourselves, but we wanna do that non-judgmentally, right? And that's the mindfulness piece.
Yeah. So, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just gonna kind of elaborate on that, like the respond. You said something about like when you react is emotion based, and then when you respond, it's value based.
Yes,
That's how you said it in office
it is.
hours.
Yes, that's true. Because you're giving yourself a breather for a moment, not to react. You're pausing to acknowledge what emotion is here, giving you the opportunity to have more clarity to say, "Oh, wait, there's another option. I can respond instead of react." Right? So
Yeah.
what's a value that I can respond that's aligned with that's going to be less stressful?
Yeah.
So even
I
if it's not eating the full piece of cake, maybe it's eating half of it, okay? But you know what I mean? It's like any difference helps.
So I was coaching someone a long time ago, and she realized something that kind of blew her mind. She was like, I'm trying to improve my health, but it's not even on my values list. So it wasn't necessarily homework that I gave her, but I think she was just working through her values.
Mhm.
And it was through a leadership program. Now I remember. So she was going through a leadership program. She was supposed to identify her personal values. And then she realized, oh my gosh, health is not on my list. Here I am continually meeting with you, trying to get healthy. I'm not following through. Perhaps it's because health is not a value of mine. And I'm like, that could be. So I think for you, my question was, are values something that can be cultivated or developed based on desires? Because anybody that's listening to this podcast cares about being healthy, but I would not assume that health was a core value unless they have the results of good health, you know? So I think sometimes it's like a subconscious value, because if you were to ask me what my core values are, I wouldn't even necessarily say health, but clearly it is, because I think you can, this is my opinion, so I'd love your perspective.
Yeah.
I think that you can tell somebody's values by their results, by how they spend their time, their energy, and their money. That's like where their true values that they're at least living are. What is your thought on that? Like, how can you identify? Let's start with this. How can you identify somebody's values, or can you? What's your thought there?
Yeah, when you're working with another person, like they'll it's interesting because I love that example you gave. If it's not on her original values list of health being on her original list, it may not be.
Yeah.
It may not be a value of hers. It could be a goal of hers. There's a difference between a goal and a value. Okay.
So walk us through that.
So I might have a goal to, like, the goal could be to exercise 3 times a week, right? And I'm the goal is there, how do I say this? Supported by the values of health, longevity, commitment, mobility.
And then,
But the goal is to work out, right? It's hard to find. So there's the goal, but I want to go deeper. What's meaningful to you about that goal? That's the value, right? Now, some people will say, I want to be more caring, right? So it must be a value of mine, but let's say they're not. They're not
right,
demonstrating that behavior.
right.
Not a value, right? It's not a value, it's a goal. Now, they can get there to be more caring and show, like, maybe more compassion and empathy to others. Usually, though, we want to be careful of a lot of slippery slope here. Sometimes people will pick a value because it's a should
Yeah.
or an ought to. And if they tend to operate it this way for their life, that's their inner critic at work. And the inner critic can put on lots of disguises and, making us believe that it's a value, but really it's based on a should. Maybe someone told them, you should really care about your health, right?
Right,
And so, like, yeah, that's a value. But
right.
when you're a person, notice that, hey, I don't have health on there. That's okay. I love to have people practice gentle curiosity.
Mhm.
What is what was that like for you to notice that health's not a value? What do you make of it?
What if somebody does wanna make health a value, but it's not currently, I always say, like, it has to be in their realm of conscious awareness,
Mhm.
and I do believe that a lot of people are not consciously aware of their choices and how their choices are impacting their health. I find with the degree of metabolic illness and obesity and all of the issues that we have in our society right now, I just find it very hard to believe that people would make a conscious effort to make choices that lead to that health outcome. That's my personal bias.
Mhm.
But let's say that they want health to be a value, but their behavior indicates it's not a value yet. How would you go about helping somebody instill the value of health into their identity?
Well, first I would want to see if they may have the value of health. It just might be buried
Okay.
deep beneath stressful thoughts, right? That they're not someone who values their health because look at their situation, right? Okay. So we tend to be our own worst critic and not give ourselves credit for, you know, maybe even considering that are doing things aligned with the value of health. It may not be socially acceptable because we're not fitting this, like, recipe criteria, checking off the list of maybe someone that we follow, right? On social media or our friends, our family members. But it might be there, but they just haven't given themselves credit for that, right?
Okay.
So I would get curious about that because sometimes that inner critic just overshadows everything and won't let them, you know, acknowledge that they are valuing their health by even showing up to certain things, right?
Yeah.
So, like, there's that ownership part that can be really difficult for people who are depressed, or feeling extreme anxiety.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so what do I and so many people are dealing with that. I'm reading a book right now called Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind by Dr. Georgia Ede, and I think that her episode will air before this one. It's really interesting, but also so eye-opening to see how many people deal with mental health issues like depression, anxiety. I almost feel like that adds another layer to this conversation because if health is a core value, but let's say it's buried beneath, you said, stressful thoughts, critical self-talk,
Mhm.
but then there's that other layer of anxiety and depression. I mean, how do you like, where do you even start with that to help somebody address the stressful thinking and address the critical self-talk while navigating anxiety and depression to get to that core value of health and then start to kind of make more healthy choices?
Yeah, you start with awareness. You start with awareness and having them practice lots of self-compassion, which I consider as being friendly towards yourself, right? And we're not when things are not going ideally or how we think how they should be going, we're more critical than anything. So this is why I always start off with mindfulness or mindful awareness. Um, because we will look at life through a distorted lens if we are operating on autopilot,
Yeah.
and when you pause to slow down, the lens gets clearer because if you can name things that's going on for you, right? The lens gets clearer, you'll have more clarity, you'll be able to think more thoughtfully, and you might see that, hey, I'm showing up for a coaching session or I'm showing up to office hours. I do value my health. Right? But there's so much again, it can get just so buried. So, when you talked about stressful thoughts, here's just a very simple sentence I'll teach people to practice mindfulness. I call it like step 1 in stress reduction is mindful awareness. So, the sentence is, "I'm noticing that I'm feeling dot, dot, dot." You insert
Mm.
the emotion word. So, I'm noticing that I'm feeling anxiety. I'm noticing that I'm feeling fearful. Now, you can also insert a stressful thought, but it's important to shorten the thought. You want to like name the thought, but not the story. You don't want to get into the story that's behind the thought. Right. So it's, I'm noticing I'm feeling anxiety, or I'm noticing that I'm fearful about my podcast today. I'm not gonna do well. I'm noticing that I'm catastrophizing. I'm noticing that I'm, all or nothing thinking. These are called thinking traps, right? Different categories. I'm noticing that I'm magnifying the negative and discounting the positive. I'm noticing that I'm, ruminating, right, about things in the past, or I'm rehearsing what's gonna happen in the future. In other words, you're not present. You're living your mind's living somewhere else. And I think the mind is really important to welcome. I like to think about welcome all thoughts as, with willing hands, right? Everything that you experience with willing hands instead of like, "This shouldn't be happening," which is resistance, and then more stress happens. This
Yeah.
work is hard, turning towards what's challenging for us so that we can be freer, of the grip that these things have on us. We can be feeling more like ourselves or how we really wanna feel. Right. So it's a kind of a longer it's a process to have someone begin to practice. Mindfulness practices take a while. There's the formal practice of it, which is sitting in meditation and being still and silent with yourself, right? Just noticing what's arising. The goal of meditation is not to, reach a state of nirvana or enlightenment. Okay. It's really simply to pay attention. What's here? What am I noticing? Um, Where I think a lot of people think the goal is like, I gotta feel relaxed after it. And if I don't, then I'm not doing it right. It's not that. It's we want to include everything. Oh, that's great that you notice that you're feeling angst. Wonderful. Great noticing. Do we do that? No. Right?
Well, I think we can learn how to do it, and I wanna backtrack really quick because I love what you said about the thinking traps,
Mhm.
and I just wanted to kind of, catalog those for people because I like the pattern recognition. I think it helps people learn faster. You said, "Am I catastrophizing a situation?" You said, "Am I exaggerating the negative and reducing the positive?" You said, "Am I ruminating about something in the past or rehearsing something about the future?" You said, "All or nothing." What are the other thought traps that
Let me see if I can think of any others that come up. Personalizing.
okay, well, give us an example of that.
So personalizing might be, let's say your boss was to say to you, like, "Oh, wow, thanks for the presentation, but there's some areas that, that I think that you could, we can work on to improve future presentations." So then you leave the meeting, you're like, "I'm such a loser. I didn't do it right. I was never gonna." So you're personalizing it, right?
Yeah,
It's about me. I shouldn't even be trying to get promoted, right?
yes.
It's like we're quick to do that. I had a friend once when we were in a department store, and is that even a term anymore? A department store?
I did.
I'm just wondering if I'm dating myself. Anyways, and she was feeling hurt because no one came to ask her if she needed help trying anything
Oh,
on. She's like, "Oh, what do they think? I'm not dressed well for the day?" Like,
oh my, so that's a good example of
right?
personal. Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. So thinking traps. There's ways to work with them. So what you
Wait, before we move on, would you consider victimizing another one? Like, being the victim, or does that fall into something else?
Yeah, I mean, that can fall into, like, it's yeah, you could say that. I mean, I don't think it's officially named victimizing, but it could be that personalizing or, oh, yeah, there is something to it, and I can't remember the exact term. I'm gonna have to check on that, get back to you. But yes, there is something like that where, like, this is always happening to me,
Yeah, stuff
right?
like that, like,
Right?
"So and so was so mean to me again," and, like, just they're always so focused on what other people are doing to them, and they just have that victim-y vibe to them. I didn't know if there was, like, something
Yeah.
over
There
that.
is there is one thing. I'll see if I can find that for you. But, yeah, there is something like that. But though each one of those thinking trap categories has these individual stressful thoughts.
Mhm.
So one way to work with them is to challenge them gently. So if my thought is, um, let's see, let me check one of those things like, "Oh, this always happens to me." Let's take a victimization
Yeah.
thing, right? Right? This is always happening to me. So challenge it. Find an alternative thought that's less stressful than that one.
Yeah.
So just change the tune. It's kind of like reframing, right? So just finding another one that might be, like, ouch, that kind of hurt, like, right? That kind of hurt. And it's okay. You know what? I'm just going to, continue on with my life and letting my values lead the way, even when I'm experiencing stress. That's what's so key about behavior change is that when stress is present, our values tend to fade in the background. And what comes up front for us that's leading the way are the emotions and the stressful thoughts. So, what we want to do is we want to manage all of that, right? So, instead of the stressful thoughts and the emotions making our choices and our values are back here, we want to do this, right?
No, that makes total sense. I think people can definitely resonate. Like, yes, I want to be values driven, but then I get stressed out and I either completely forget or I don't feel like I have as clear like focus to be able to follow through on my goal, like on my goal action items. So how do you suggest somebody manage that stress to kind of I view it as like an ocean.
Mm,
And like there's a lot of like the stress is the waves in the ocean. And the value is like the treasure at the bottom of the ocean, kind of like at the core of who you are. And if the water is still, you can kind of see through that. And I think that's where these mindfulness practices come in is they help facilitate internal stillness, stillness of thought, etc. But then if there's a lot of choppy water, it's very difficult to see those values and live from them. And this is a side note, but I would love if we could talk about at some point in this conversation, maybe let's try now, and then we'll get to the ways to manage the stress.
Okay.
What are the, like, what role do you think distractions play in stress? Like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Pinterest, the news, like
Every
all of that.
it plays everything. It plays a big role. So I call it the what's next culture. Okay.
Okay.
What can be referred to as being on autopilot, but I call it what's next. Now, of course, I live, near Silicon Valley, heart of tech, right? And it's like, but this is really everywhere now. Culture has changed so dramatically. Uh, so what's next is, oh, gotta call my mechanic, right? Take my car in. Oh, but then, I gotta call my parents. Oh, and I need to, send an email and I need to get back and do this and that. And so you need to empty the dishwasher. And so we're living energetically on the edge of our seat for the what's next. That's what's going to keep us sick. And so we want to really be able to kind of sit back a little bit in our seat and like get ways to be more present and changing the mode of what's next to just being instead of doing.
All right, this is a selfish question, but can I be and watch TV? Or is that not count?
Um, well, I think that you can have include both. So I can tell you, for me, because of the work I do, it's energetically for me to be present. It can be a little draining sometimes when I'm present for a multitude of people in a day.
Yeah,
So,
for real, yes.
right? It
I
really is, and I know you know.
I
And
know.
so and so for me, sometimes I like watching mindless television.
Yeah,
So
me
I
too.
right? So it's there's nothing of value that I'm gaining from these shows that I watch, which I love. It
Okay.
gives my mind a break, right? But I am also not doing that every night, right? And, you know, what I do
I was just thinking like my lunch break. So
yeah.
oh, go ahead, sorry, you cut
No, no,
off
no,
first.
no. Tell me about your lunch break. What were you thinking of doing?
Oh, eating lunch and watching TV. And it's like
Wonderful.
I always think like, okay, well, I'm pretty good at like not overeating, I have what I'm gonna eat and I'm gonna like do that in front of the TV. Oh, well, you're gonna eat more than you should if you watch TV. No. But it's almost just like an enjoyable activity. So it's more enjoyable. This is like me getting coaching from you. For me to watch TV while I enjoy my meal. It's almost like you said, it's just not something that I have to be present to. Versus if I sit at the table with the TV off, I almost feel like I'm flooded with these thoughts of like, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this. Like this, like that, what's next
Yeah.
almost happens more so when I'm present, especially midday. So one of our coaches, Lydia, I don't know where this study is from, but she mentioned that like those types of like racing thoughts or intruding thoughts happen more so like midday, and then those get lesser at the beginning and the end of the day. And so the researchers found, that you can kind of interpret that differently. Like meditation may be more like maybe easier at the beginning or the end of the day, maybe more helpful to have like a mindful pause in the middle of the day. I don't know, but that has been, like, running through my brain, like, how bad is it that I wanna sit down and watch TV over my lunch break? What's
Well,
your insight there?
I think you would want to do it. Noticing I'm trying to stay away from should. I don't think you should. I'm like, if something that gifts you a break, like a mental break,
Yeah, that's what it is.
great. For other people, it's gonna be different things. Someone might, I don't know, wanna lurk on social media. Other people wanna, it's like it's gonna be different, I
Yeah,
might wanna go for a walk, or I know, I'm sure you go for a walk sometimes, and we just need to
yeah.
also have clarity. So, I think it's important for us to know, what do we value? Like, what do you so let me ask you this. What do you when you're there sitting watching mindless television, what do you get a sense of?
Relaxation.
Beautiful. Is that a value of yours?
Yes, actually, my husband and I talked. I asked my husband, like, what his values were. I was so surprised when he said relaxation was, like, one of his top values, but his
Beautiful.
and I'm like, "Mine too, actually. I'm gonna take that one on too."
So
So that's
write that
only
on your sheet of paper, right? Relaxation, right? And then as you uncover things that, when you start to question, why do we get something from doing this activity?
yeah,
Other people don't
yeah.
do. It's like, no, I already know. I value it too for the same thing. I can turn off my mind.
But it's intentional too. It's not like I'm going there for like hours and hours. It's like I'm taking a mindfulness break, relaxing by this. And as you mentioned, I think it's person specific, but also situationally. Like sometimes relaxing for me is going for like a slow, short walk outside over my lunch break. That does it, but not today because my muscles are super sore and I'm standing for hours in interviews and I want to sit down and relax for some time.
Yeah,
So I think it like not being super rigid with how we express our values, I think is helpful to like avoid that shitting ourselves with like, oh, I shouldn't be watching TV. It's a waste of my time. Like that helps me, that gives me a little bit more grace with myself that nope, this is in alignment with my values still.
it is, right?
Yeah.
So what the things that will help you to honor your value of relaxation are going to look differently, maybe from one day to the next,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And that's
Right.
great, just as long as it's aligned with it, with a value, right? It's fine. Right? You're getting some benefit from it. So when we're honoring our values, there's a sense of fulfillment, of resonance, of meaningfulness. When we're not, there's a sense of dissonance, of disconnect, right?
Mhm.
So of stress.
That's a really good distinction because like a little bit of TV can help me relax, but too much TV, then I get that discontentment like, "Ooh, is this really in alignment with other values?" You know?
And you
So,
may
that's
unknowingly,
a fine line, I
this might be
think.
just being only to you, but you're really practicing mindfulness of knowing how to discern when is this really, watching TV is enough versus when like, oh no, I'm getting
Yeah.
kind of a funk here, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, I'm going back to my notes here. We talked about some thinking traps. We talked about how do we kind of still the murky waters of stress. And you said the first thing is mindful awareness. I would love to now get into some tools about how do we become more mindfully aware of our thoughts and our emotions.
Mhm. Okay. So, first of all, some situations, the emotions could be too strong to be really thoughtful about how you want to proceed, right?
Yeah.
And we want to, and that's most of the time when there is like acute stress, right, happening, some sharp event. Um, so you will want to get your body to be more present. So one of the first techniques is a breathing technique. And it's simply this. I'm not going to walk you through it because I know we don't have enough time to walk through all of these, but it's breathing in very deeply to the count of 4 and then exhaling very slowly to the count of 8. And you do that for 3 rounds of inhale and exhale. This can help to take us out of that fight, flight, freeze mode, right? And be a little bit more centered. And I like this one because you can do it if you're in a Zoom meeting. No one's
I'm
gonna know
doing it
that
right
you're
now.
doing you can be doing it right now. I do it often. It's really helpful because if I don't, then I'll tend to react versus respond.
Yeah.
You're just giving yourself a gift of 10 seconds, right? And that 10 seconds can make a big difference on maybe something you might regret. So that's the first one. The next one, I'm just looking at my reference of the activities I listed here to the side, is what I call the 5 4 3 2 1 exercise. You may have heard this. It's naming 5 things that you can see in the moment. So you're pausing to name 5 things that you see in your environment that are around you, and then you name them. So I could say earbuds, tape dispenser, glass of water, pink Post-it, right? You just name things. 4 things you can feel. So the softness of my socks, the backrest of my chair, um, the achiness in my legs from my workout yesterday, right? 3 things you can hear, the sound of a gardener's blower, right? My husband talking to somebody in the other room. So you just name these things. 2 things you can smell, I still smell the coffee from this morning, right? And one thing you can taste. So I put a little cinnamon in my coffee this morning, and I can still, like, there's some remnants of that. This helps you to be present. This is a great thing to do when you're feeling anxiety. Let's say you're in the car in traffic, which can be very scary. And I also want to pause and hear something I want to just interject. A definition of anxiety that I love, and it's this: it's a disturbance of the mind regarding uncertainty.
I like that too.
Okay. So it's all about, who am I becoming? What's going to happen to me? When we're feeling anxious, we're not so present, but it's okay. Anxiety is a visitor, just like all the other emotions. It's going to change. Okay. So that's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 activity. The other thing is to watch your mind like you're sitting in a movie theater. So if you were sitting in the audience by yourself and you're watching the screen, you can watch thoughts that are coming through your mind, but watch the words come across the screen, right? Got to call the dentist. Um, um, why did that person break up with me? What, whatever it might be, any thought, just be more of an observer. With mindfulness, you're more of an observer of your present moment. You're kind of like a scientist in the lab, studying things very closely, right? Than a participant with that, with everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So we want to be more of an observer, less of a participant with it. Last one is mindfulness in daily life. So that's the informal practice of mindfulness. Formal is meditation. And then informal is, how do I notice things in my daily activities as I'm washing the dishes, the smell of the dishwashing soap. So we're slowing things down, right? The temperature of the water, the warmth of it, the sponge that you're using, the texture of that. Maybe you wash dishes with plastic gloves, like noticing these things. Things like playing with your children, right? Usually when I am think about when my kids are little, there is always a smile on my face, right? But being present for that movement in the face changing, the sound of their laughter, and they each have different sounds. Like, really be here, not be here in your body in the moment, not here, because this can be a bad neighborhood.
And for people who are listening, when she said not here, she was pointing to her head, like be in your body, not in your head, because sometimes the head can be a bad neighborhood. And that's kind of where, if you're feeling the anxiety, coming back into your body and using the five senses can be a helpful tool.
Mhm.
Uh, all right, those are awesome. I wanted to ask you a question too that was on our list here. So, did you have any other like skills or practices that you teach your client to manage stress more skillfully, or are those kind of the top ones to be mindful and
Yeah,
be present?
there are some others. So the values activity is important. The mindful awareness is important. Um, Perspectives. So if we're looking at, let's say, improving our health, but we're standing in a perspective that's disempowering. So maybe I'm standing, if things aren't changing with my health or improving, then maybe, and I'm noticing I'm having stressful thoughts, I might be standing in a perspective of, so naming it, of it's never going to work perspective. So then I want them to, like, what would be the opposite of that perspective? Just to play around, but actually have them play around with different perspectives. Um, and I'll get silly about it, right? So like, what would the monkey perspective be? Well, the monkey perspective, like the monkeys just let go with the flow. They're hanging out. They're okay with it. They know that, they're just chilling, right? Is that
Mhm.
less stressful, right? Or maybe the perspective of things not happening the way ideally you want them to be, maybe what might be more freeing for you is, the patient's perspective, or the
Yeah.
grace perspective, the self-compassionate perspective. So find the one that's empowering, but I have them try each one on their body. What do you notice changes? What constricts in you? What opens up in you when you visit and you try on each perspective relating to your health progress?
Yeah. And I think that you brought up an important point there, like feeling the body. Like trying to get better and better at paying attention, not just to my thoughts, but to my physical feelings. So if I'm thinking about making a decision, if I'm thinking about saying yes to something, what comes up in my actual physical body? And it's interesting, like, I don't know if your mom ever did this, but my mom, when she slammed on the brakes for whatever reason, maybe she saw a cop or didn't want to run a red light, she put her hand out and she blocked my chest from going forward in the car. And that's the exact physical feeling that I feel if I make a decision. If I'm thinking about saying yes to a decision that intuitively I think maybe my mind, my spirit may not be in best alignment with that. Does that make sense? Like if I'm thinking about saying yes,
Mhm.
but my intuition is maybe encouraging me to say no, like, that's, like, the feeling that I feel.
Um,
Would you interpret that, like, any differently? But it's like a backwards pressure on my upper chest, like where my mom's hand used to go in the car.
do you s do you sense that that pressure on your chest is a protective one, or does it feel like it's a restraining one?
Yeah, that's really good. Ooh, I have never asked that question.
So this is
I would say a little bit like, if I just top of mind, it's hard because I think that there's elements of both.
so great. So get curious about the elements of both.
Yeah,
What are they? Right? We want to listen to I think our body never lies, right?
yeah,
But our minds can make up all kinds of things, right?
yeah.
I happen to have one of those minds that loves to make up stuff, right? So I know this about me. I tend to be the catastrophizer, right? So, but I don't, if I'm not critical of it, I kind of welcome it and I kind of giggle a little bit. It's like, oh, there I go again, catastrophizing, right? Versus like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I still think this way. I'm such a loser. Okay. There's a difference here.
Yes, yeah,
Right. So like get curious about that protectiveness or restraint.
yeah. Is it self-imposed or is it externally imposed, or how would you describe those? Because I think part of this skill of mindfulness is honestly it's a language skill to find the right words that kind of hit the brain right to be like, "Oh, I get it now," or, "Oh, yes, I feel more peace." So,
Yeah.
how would you describe those 2 things and, like, coach me or whoever else through it to just to be a better discerner of their feelings?
Yeah. So when you notice that feeling of your mom's arm there, um, is is there an emotion at all, or is there a thought around it?
I would say, like, guarding my safety.
Okay. So, is safety a value of yours?
I've never identified it as one, but I don't intentionally do risky activities that jeopardize my safety.
Well, let's put a different word on it. What, because you were just sharing how important the words are, and they are.
Yeah.
What it's is stability or security a values of yours?
I would actually probably say stability. Like, in my personal faith formula, it used to say, like, we have like, a predictable, secure, or stable house or something like that,
Mm.
Like, that predictability for our children was important to us. Yeah, so maybe stability.
So, like, I'm curious to have you kind of pause and reflect upon in your body, um, what's the sense if you're thinking if it's more of a protecting the stability kind of thing? Am I right in saying that, or do you feel like it's something different? And if it's something different, what is it to you?
I almost feel like it's a precautionary, like, "Don't go there." Like, but I'm not sure why. Like, "Don't go there." It's like,
So
"Right here, don't go there."
don't go there. Okay. So
That's
it may be something for you to consider, whatever this thing is that you're considering to do or not to do, right? To consider the outcomes of it, right? To try it on to see, is if I was to do this thing that I'm thinking of doing, because I'm guessing there's a decision, right, for you to make.
sure, or like there's always decisions to make, yeah.
Yeah, so it could just be like maybe this feeling of the arm is telling you to slow down and make a thoughtful choice,
Yeah.
right? Just slow down, put the brakes on a little, really think about this more thoughtfully. And it could be an opportunity for you to let your values make the choice and not the shoulds, have tos, ought tos, or your doubts, right?
Mhm.
Or any stressful thought that might be leading the way.
Interesting.
So
Well, I know that was kind of like a caveat, but I had to just give an example of just like feeling instead of always just paying attention to our thought, paying attention to how things make us feel
yeah,
too. So
yeah.
that's really great. Any other tools to manage stress more skillfully that you wanted to share?
I think I just want to give I guess it's an analogy. There's two of them. The first one is this. We see people walking their dogs all the time. Hey, and sometimes it looks like the dog is walking its owner because it's energetically pulling its owner around, dragging it around. Our strong emotions can be like that energetic dog. They can drag us around without our say so, unless we're practicing awareness that this is happening. Okay. So we want to train the dog mindfulness, right?
Right.
We want to train and like become aware of what's going on in this moment. What is my body experiencing? Where do I sense in my body this emotion? What color is it? Is there a texture to it? Right. Just like if you were a scientist in the lab looking at an emotion through a microscope, you're going to notice the qualities. It's like COVID. Oh, it's got spiky proteins.
Yeah.
You notice that we all emotions have different qualities to them. So get to know yours, and they all show up differently. The other analogy is this: if we're feeling a strong emotion, let's just say anxiety, it's kind of like here in the core of you, it's like an arrow. I call this emotion the mother. Okay? Emotions usually happen first, and then it gives birth to stressful thoughts. So this first arrow, first is there's a little suffering around it. Okay. So that's what we use in the mindfulness word is a term of something that's not just something that we can easily get over. There's some maybe more chronic stress that there's suffering. So here comes the children giving out of the emotion of anxiety, stressful thoughts of, oh my gosh, I don't know what's going to happen to me. Another stressful thought is, well, what if this happens? And it could be catastrophizing thought too, right? So every single arrow is born out of the emotion. So
Yeah.
all these arrows contribute to greater levels of stress or suffering. So what we'll want to do when we notice that our thoughts are being born from an emotion is to see in your mind, just let the arrows fall gently to the ground and just come back and be with the emotion itself and explore anxiety, just like I said as a scientist. Get to know it, turn towards it. The more you turn towards something, the more likely you're going to reduce the power it has on you if you explore it a little bit with gentle curiosity and non-judgmentally.
Yeah. And that self-compassion. I just love that word of just compassion, because I think I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty good at it now, but I've coached so many people who really struggle with that critical self-talk.
Yeah, I bet.
Mm.
It's a part of our daily life as a human being. I
Mm.
heard this quote from Dr. Susan David, who's a psychologist. She's done a great TED Talk on emotions. She says, the only people that don't experience stress are dead people.
Yeah, right.
I really don't want people to hold a bar too high, like no stress is the bar. No, you would not be alive. Right? But how do we navigate or surf as you did talked earlier? And I use the same kind of metaphor of surfing the
Yeah.
waves, right? How do we surf the waves so that we can still move towards being the best version of ourselves? So we manage the stressors as best we can.
Yeah.
And then re reshine the flashlight of attention to the values to guide your way out.
Yep. And I think that's important. We didn't really talk about that today, but like managing the stressors is important. So really figuring out what is stressing you out and then making a proactive plan to reduce the exposure to or the duration of that stress, I think is really important too. So, all right, last question for you here. What do you find to be the most redeeming part of the work you do as a coach? I just love that question, and I was curious as to your answer.
Oh my gosh. It's so beautiful to be a coach. I think it's really watching someone arrive at the point in their life where they're willing to do the hard work of taking a closer look at what's really going on, not just goal setting, right? Like what's really going on? How do I work with the obstacles that prevent me from maybe reaching the goals using self-compassion, right? Because nobody gets it right sustained all the time. Okay. So, yeah. So it's just beautiful to watch their journey as I continually watch my own.
No,
And forever a student, even though we teach this to thousands of people.
I know. Like, I got coaching today. It was fantastic. I'm gonna
Yeah.
watch TV with no guilt.
It's beautiful. And this is why I came to you too, right? I don't have the answers. I'm not an expert, right? But I really value the human experience of what other people have to share. And I learn from every single client of mine, and there's no greater honor.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing those insights. I'm really glad that I had you on the podcast. And where can people connect with you if they want to after this show?
Sure. My website is aliciamclucas.com, and you can reach out to me there with any questions you might have. I'm happy to be of support.
Perfect. And we will link that in the show notes for people. Thank you so much. I hope you
Thank
have a great
you.
day. And listeners, if you found this one helpful, find us on Instagram, shoot us a message, let us know kind of what tip you found the most helpful today. And I hope you use some of it. I know I'm going to use that 4-8 breathing technique more often. Like even when I'm watching TV after this, eating my lunch, I'm going to be more mindful about what I'm doing as I'm doing it and be more mindful to incorporate those breathing practices today. So thank you for that.
Beautiful. Thank you.